All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to your Everything College Football podcast. Today, me and Nick here, we're doing our analysis of a bit of a hot topic in college football right now. USC Trojans, they've been making some big moves in their front office, really taking the college football world by storm, kind of setting up, a super team of sorts is what it's being called in their front office roles to really help them, establish, better tactics in terms of recruiting and better attractment when it comes to building up this roster and making them a legit contender in college football as a powerhouse once again. We'll go ahead and look at some of these hires in depth here in a moment, Nick. But I first kind of want to get your thoughts on what USC's did the last 2 years in terms of this aggressive approach from Lincoln Riley. He's not being complacent. They blew an opportunity to win a national championship when they had Caleb Williams due to horrendous defense coordinated by Alex Grinch. He ended up getting fired, but it was way too late, and it should have been done way sooner into the USC tenure. And you can't go back and change time, Nick. So all you can do is try to correct things for the future and learn from your past mistakes. And it seems like Lincoln Riley's doing that. He was very selective when it came to making a defensive staff last year with Dalton Lynn as the DC, came in and made immediate improvements. This was a competent defense last season, and the improvements should continue to be better from this defense. All across the board, though, the staff has been quite impressive. And now he's, turned to his front office, which is now a thing in college football, of course. They've made some phenomenal hires. What do you make of this aggressiveness from Lincoln Riley? Some people are talking hot seat. With what he's doing with this assertiveness, I think he's cooling that thing right down.
Yeah, I think the seat's very cold for Lincoln Riley right now. I think the team is heading in the right direction with him at the helm in the Big Ten. I think this team showed a lot of promise last year. I think they're heading in the right direction with a solid staff. Hiring a GM is a crazy thing to say, 5 years ago for a college team to hire a GM, but now it's the norm. We saw, Bill Belichick and UNC hire Michael Lombardi, who was a former GM for the Browns. Didn't have a great, year there in his 1 year there, but he was with the Patriots for a couple years. They won some Super Bowls. He worked with Belichick, so this is a guy that knows what he's doing. He previously was a recruiting coordinator for UNLV. So now it's a new thing. You got to hire a GM. You got to have somebody do that structure, and they bring in a guy that I think is really solid that we're going to talk about in a second from Notre Dame. This is something you have to do, right? This is something you need to go and figure out that you can do with your college football team. Lincoln Riley knows the portal's a big deal. He loves the portal. He's worked on it in the past. And I think, the defensive issues have started to correct themselves a little bit. I think Dalton Lynn has been a really good defensive coordinator for this team, as has Henderson, his assistant, as they co-defensive coordinators there. They brought in Rob Ryan, who's going to work on the defense as well, a guy that's got some experience in the NFL, who's been doing some good things. I think will do some good things with this defense. I think USC's a lot closer to competing for a national title than people give them credit for. This team still has a lot of fight. They went and beat an SEC team in LSU this past season. I think Lincoln Riley's a hell of a coach that can really put together an offense. I like what they're doing here, and in this new day and age, you have to have that great support staff around you in terms of front office aspect and things of that nature, and that's what they're doing so far. I love these moves, and I think USC is heading in the right direction. This team looks to be primed to compete very soon.
Yeah, you alluded to Rob Ryan coming in as the linebacker coach. They also added Trevon Reed from UCF as the DB's coach, and then Dalton Lynn ended up resigning after Penn State pursued, and clearly they were offering a lot of money to some high-end candidates, so very impressive stuff to be able to retain some of those guys that are very important for this program. Now we'll go ahead and dive into what we're alluding to when it comes to this front office. Chad Bowden arrives from Notre Dame the last couple of years. He's been a highly touted person for them for the last 4 seasons, that is, and he was their GM last year. And he was named Football Scope's Player Personnel Director of the Year. Very impressive, honors to be given out for him. This is a guy who's going to make around $1 million a year, as he was hired on January 24th. USC last year had offered Alabama GM Courtney Morgan a deal that was similar. He ended up turning that down. He makes about $825K per season over there in Tuscaloosa. So this is something that's kind of been in the works for USC, trying to find a good front man to lead the recruiting charge for them. This is a guy who was the director of recruiting at Cincinnati, and when Marcus Freeman went to South Bend, he brought Bowden with him. This is a guy who's been known for having great roster construction across the board, and you've seen that with Notre Dame. They had a lot of depth in key areas. I mean, they had a lot of youthful guys have to step in at times throughout a very long season, as they did go very far, reaching the national championship. And, so we talked about Notre Dame a lot, Nick, so we had a pretty good insight into their roster. Riley Leonard went down for, a drive. Steve Angeli comes in at quarterback, leads them downfield for a score. Some guys on the offensive line step up and gave quality play in the Orange Bowl as well. They were very deep at running back and wide receiver. Defense as well. Guys in the secondary and up front on the D-line to step up. So this roster is it was constructed almost like an NFL type of approach, Nick, where they were just able to insert guys no matter what, and they all stepped up, and that's why they made it so far I think that's the biggest reason why this guy had so much, so much praise from last season.
Yeah, I think Bowden's a really good hire. This is a guy that was a general manager slash assistant athletic director, so he has some work experience with some other parts of athletic departments, not just the football team, which I think does make you a more well-rounded general manager, having experience working with other sports programs within a college program. I think this is a really good spot. Like I said in the early episode, you need a general manager in this day and age with the NIL stuff, and this is a guy that's constructed a strong roster at Notre Dame. It seems to be a very experienced piece to add to this, front office that they're building here. This is a guy that's helped bring in some solid players, and when you look at Notre Dame, they've liked to do the quarterback route out of the portal recently. They brought in Riley Leonard, obviously. They've done that in the past. This is a similar setup in USC, where they bring in a lot of portal quarterbacks as well. Next guy up mentality, so it could certainly work out well out west. I think this is a really good hire. This is a football mind who's really solid at constructing rosters, with a deep roster that you alluded to at Notre Dame this past season, as well as experience in other parts of the athletic department. This is a home run hire for me. I think it's a really good guy to lead this team and kind of start constructing this roster on both sides of the ball. A roster that I think does need some help on the offense and needs a little bit of help on defense as well.
Yeah, and Bowden, he's going to lead the recruiting charge here. If Lincoln Riley, having more of a hands-off approach in that regard, wants to heavily get back to recruiting the state of California at the high school levels, and this guy also used the transfer portal very well. That's a very big key that he alluded to, Nick, is recruiting in their own state. It's been embarrassing for USC as of late recruiting in the state of California. Oregon, under Dan Lanning, of course, has done really well, but Mario Cristobal did even better when he was there. When Pete Carroll was at USC, there was a gate around the state of California, Nick. They're one of the top 3 states in the country for talent, maybe even the best in the deepest, opinion-based, of course. But there's an elite amount of talent regardless in this state. USC is just not walking away with it. Alabama, for example, has 4 of the top 5, or 3 of the top 5 guys that is in the state of California. Why is that happening? Hayden Lowe at number 2 was committed to USC, decommits as a 5-star. He's going to Miami. Again, why is this happening, Nick? It's pretty ridiculous, and I think now that they have a front office staff put in charge that can make this a focal point, led by a guy who understands that the way to dominate is to get back to winning in their home state. They should not be losing these guys. Penn State's coming in here and grabbing talent, Texas A&M, everybody you can think of. USC only has 2 of the top 15 guys, 3 of the top 20, that is, in California. That's just not going to cut it. But if they can get back to establishing that this is going to be a pipeline for them, the entire state of California, they can be back to dominating college football.
In-state recruiting isn't everything, but it's a big piece of the pie. You want to be able to recruit on your own turf and bring in a lot of talented pieces. An Alabama fan, I always hope that Alabama is able to recruit and bring in-state guys battling with Auburn, who have fared better in-state as of late, but Alabama has gone out of state to complement those pieces and fill out the puzzle. But when you look at there's a couple of states where you really want to win that battle, talent-rich states, Texas, Florida, California, throw Georgia in there, right? Those are very talent-rich states. You want to win that battle, and there's no reason why USC shouldn't win that battle, being the dominant force in college football in the state of California and on the West Coast. This should be an easy win, right? But they're losing talented players from Mater Dei, a high school that pumps out phenomenal players, top overall picks in the NFL draft. They lost Bryce Young to Alabama, right? They're losing in-state players that are going to other schools, and even losing a couple players to Stanford and UCLA, which is certainly not something you want to see if you're a USC fan. I think they got to start building from the ground up and start winning the battles out west again, and then focus on attacking the territories in Georgia and Florida and Texas, some areas where they could get some of the talent that doesn't go to the schools that dominate those states. Building your in-state recruiting profile is a really great step in the right direction. Some schools, they only focus on in-state really and don't bring in a lot of talent from outside the state. I think that's the wrong approach. You got to be balanced, but favor your in-state if you're in a talented like that. I want to see USC have a 60-40 in terms of bringing in high-level talent from California, and then outside of California, I think that could be a really big step in the right direction. Lincoln Riley is a phenomenal recruiter. I think he's going to continue to develop that, but having Bowden being involved in the process now can certainly help out. There's tons of talent in the state of California, the biggest state in the nation. A lot of high school football players that are really good. Mater Dei, the high school that I'm referring to, one of the best high schools in the country. Some other great schools out there as well. Some talented players coming out of Nevada, just across the border as well. You want to win those battles, bring those guys in. These are incredibly talented young men that you're losing to other programs that are at the top level programs of college football. You got to start winning those battles at home.
One thing USC was doing last year that was really upsetting and didn't really make a whole lot of sense. At first, it was impressive as they were going to Georgia and Florida, that southern region, landing high-end recruits. Not a single one of them stayed, though. They all ended up flipping and going elsewhere. It seemed like just a leverage ploy for money. And it seemed like kind of an odd strategy. Like, yeah, you were landing the verbal commitment, but the signature is all that matters. and then them playing there for a couple of years matters as well. And that certainly just didn't seem to be like a bold approach. So, reestablishing that gate, like you said, Nevada, Arizona, schools like that in the area, you can win just recruiting those areas. Look at some of the other additions to the staff. Zaire Turner, she was brought over with Bowden from Notre Dame. She was the director of player personnel. That's where the role here will be. The role at Notre Dame was so coveted that she was leading the recruiting trail while the Irish were busy with college football playoff prep and practice and all that. Very busy time for teams that have earned the chance to play for a national championship. You have to have somebody go out there and make efforts for these recruits, and she was the one leading that charge, Nick. So this is another person that Notre Dame certainly hates to lose, and I think that somebody that Bowden's already been established with, it's going to be a smooth transition going over to SC and immediately installing a game plan.
Yeah, I think it's a phenomenal ad, a really talented woman in this industry who's really solid at working in this department. I think Turner's a phenomenal person to add as well. She's someone that's got experience, someone that can really work hard. USC's, they've added a lot of different pieces, and some of their departures I think were positive as well. I'll highlight that in a second. But I think what they're doing here is they're just assembling a good staff that's got a couple different pieces here and there that you can plug in and develop something there.
You look at another one here. It's very interesting. This kind of reminds me of what they did last year of Matt Entz. This guy went from head coach of a team that wins national championships at the FCS level to being the linebacker coach here at USC before he moved on, of course, this past off season. Max Denecker, he was the general manager at Wisconsin, now accepts a lesser of a role at a better program at USC. He has ties to Bowden from his days at Cincinnati as well. He's going to serve as the executive of player personnel. This is a very young person. He was only 22 years old when he was put in the director of player personnel role at Wisconsin under Luke Fickell. Pretty illustrious stuff that, Luke Fickell had on his staff in terms of general management over at Cincinnati. So it's great to see that he's done, such a great job with these young men, not just on the field, but off the field as well, Nick, allowing him to leave and go to a better program. I know Fickell's probably upset with that, but he's got to be very happy of how this young man has been able to kind of rise through the ranks and now figures to serve a very key role for the Trojans.
Yeah, I think Steinecker was a really good ad. Wisconsin, they're building something out there. They haven't had the results they were quite hoping for yet, but this is a young guy who's really solid at building a front office. I think is a solid piece to add. Took a lesser role to go be out here and USC. That obviously bodes well if you're a fan of the Trojans, because you're saying guys are willing to take a step down and role to be part of building something here. So it's got to be positive to see if you're a fan of the Trojans.
And of course, the USC athletic director did confirm that the school's going to invest all the $20.5 million permitted in terms of the revenue sharing with its athletes. Will be going into this football program, and of course, you have your third-party NIL as well. So Bowden's going to be in charge of putting the staff in opportunities to succeed, but roster construction, bringing the talent, and of course establishing that gate again around California is going to be the biggest goal. So he has a lot of resources at his disposal. USC and Lincoln Riley, they're taking this very serious and trying to get back to established power in college football. Also brought over Dre Brown from Illinois. He was the executive director of scouting and player personnel for them as well. So, some interesting titles here in terms of what these people had at their other respective schools. USC has been very aggressive, and I really like the approach here from the Trojans. Will it pay off at the end? Of course, remains to be seen. But in today's day in college football, Nick, you can turn things around very fast, especially when you have all that money and the NIL opportunities at your disposal. Very interested to see what happens for USC over the next 12 months.
Yeah, I like a lot of what the front office moves are, and I also like a lot of the individual coaching moves as well. We talked about Ryan and Trevon Reed. I think those solid ads. A.J. Howard has been brought over as an assistant coach at linebacker. He was previously at App State, outside linebacker coach there. I think he's a young coach to keep an eye on. I think some of the departing staff members are positive as well. Josh Henson leaves and heads to be the offensive coordinator at Purdue. I didn't think Henson was doing a phenomenal job, and he did not have a great year as assistant head coach of the defense and at linebackers. He ends up at Fresno State. North Dakota State got better when he left. They ended up winning a national title after he was no longer the head coach. I thought he just had a kind of a quiet year, a weird year for him. He ends up leaving. I really think the biggest loss potentially could be a graduate assistant that ended up going to Georgia, Bryson Allen Williams. But again, graduate assistant not too big of a loss. I like adding Howard at linebacker coach. I think Reed's really solid at cornerbacks from UCF, and then Rob Ryan's a guy that's been around, a football guy that could be really solid for your defense overall. I think the ads are good across the board, and the departures help the team as well, and I think the front office pieces they're building there are really strong. I like the direction USC's football is going here. Investing a lot of money in your football program, giving Lincoln Riley a check to write to these athletes is a really solid way to go, and this USC team should be competitive very shortly and really find a way to be one of the top teams in the Big Ten.
They also had Chad Savage. He was the receivers coach at Colorado State for a couple of years. Did a good job with a couple of their guys. Torrey Horton, Justice, Rod Simmons, a few of the notables. And then, he's going to coach the tight ends here. He's a pretty good recruiter as well, they say. And, the ability to develop talent's been impressive as well. So a lot of aggressiveness from this USC team to, bolster its front office and its coaching staff. Good little episode here today, Nick. Some of the stuff that, goes on behind the scenes gets overlooked, but we like to highlight it because at the end of the day, it can certainly make or shape your ability to compete for a national title.
Yeah, great offseason here. Savage, formerly a recruiting coordinator at Colorado State, a guy that's really respected in the recruiting ranks. I like what they've done here. I think this USC team is making some solid moves. Going to get lost in the shuffle of the news cycle. I know Rob Ryan's press conference is making some news that's keeping people tuned into it. But I think USC is quietly getting themselves in a good position to be competitive very quickly.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.